Ever get that feeling like some words in English, they seem so basic, right? But then they come back to bite you when you least expect it. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. Get ready for a deep dive into to have. And trust me, this one's personal.
Oh, intrigue. Do tell. I'm all ears when it comes to those language aha moments.
So picture this, right? I'm at a cafe, new friends, feeling all confident, and I'm like, hey, can I take you a coffee? Silence. Everyone just stares at me.
I can only imagine. Something tells me take a coffee didn't quite land the way you hoped.
Nope. Turns out we have coffee, we don't take it.
Yeah.
Lesson learned? That's when it hit me. We got to break down to have because it's trickier than it looks.
Absolutely. And luckily, we've got the perfect guide. The British Council's got this article, El Verbo to have en anglais, and it unpacks all these little nuances that trip us up. It's so true. They start by laying out the 3 main ways we use this sneaky verb. First up, to have as a main verb. The classic, I have a dog kind of thing.
Seems simple enough, but this is where it gets interesting for Spanish speakers especially. The article points out that English loves to use have with other words to create expressions that don't translate directly. We call these verbs of support, and they can be a real curveball.
You mean like my whole coffee debacle?
Exactly. We have a drink, we have a shower, have a nap. The verb have sets the scene, and the noun tells you what's up.
Mind blown. It all makes so much sense now. Okay, so that's to have as the main event. What about round 2?
Round 2 brings us to have as an auxiliary verb, which sounds way more complicated than it is. Think of it as the sidekick to your past tenses, especially the present perfect and past perfect. Right, like, I have lived in Spain, or they had already eaten, but why is this such a big deal for non-native speakers?
Because, my friend, these tenses are all about connecting the past to the present. They make your conversations flow and sound super smooth. Plus, we throw in contractions like "v's" and "ed" when we're speaking naturally, which can sound like a foreign language in itself if you're not used to it.
It's so true. Like everyone's in on a secret code or something. Instead of I have gone to the market, you'd probably hear I've gone to the market. It just sounds more, I don't know, natural.
Exactly. And mastering this auxiliary to have, that's your ticket to sounding like a natural too.
Music to my ears. Okay, so we've tackled to have as a main verb and its alter ego, the auxiliary. What's the third member of this verb trio?
Ugh, that would be the mighty modal verb have to, which is all about expressing obligation. And while it might seem straightforward on the surface, there are some key distinctions between have to and its close cousin, must.
Okay, so have to versus must. They both kind of seem like they're saying the same thing. What's the big difference then?
It all boils down to where that obligation is coming from. With have to, think external force, like a rule you gotta follow or something. Imagine telling your friend about a movie, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
If you say you have to see this movie, it's almost like something else is making you go. Like maybe it's part of some film festival or whatever.
Oh, I see, I see. But if you hit them with, you must see this movie, then it's like,
It's a whole different vibe.
way more personal, right?
Yeah.
Like you absolutely loved it, and they're missing out if they don't see it.
Bingo. Subtle, but makes all the difference.
I love these little distinctions. Now, before we move on, can we touch on have got for a second? It's another one of those things that always makes me second guess myself.
Oh, have got, the classic curveball. It's definitely one of those regional things that can trip people up. In British English, it's basically interchangeable with have when you're talking about possessing something.
So someone could say, I've got a cat instead of I have a cat, and it's all good.
Totally. Both fly. It's more of an American English thing to stick with, just have.
Yeah.
The thing to remember is, even though it looks different, have got still uses have as that auxiliary verb.
Right, right. Like we were talking about earlier. Okay, that actually makes me feel better. What else should our listeners watch out for?
Well, this next one's a classic case of when you translate to literally from Spanish to English.
Uh-oh, I'm sensing a but coming.
It's the whole have versus be thing, especially with those words that describe how you're feeling. People accidentally say, I have cold, instead of I am cold.
Oh yeah, I've totally heard that. It just sounds dot off.
Because in English, we use be for states of being, like being cold, hungry, tired, all that good stuff. But in Spanish, tener, which means to have, often swoops in for those situations.
Ah, so that's why it happens, the direct translation trap.
Exactly. Time to rewire those brains to think in English mode.
Challenge accepted. Speaking of challenges, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Or should I say elephants?
Let me guess. We're talking double have situations.
The dreaded have had rears its ugly head. Even though I know it's grammatically legit, it still makes me do a double take every time.
It does look kind of strange, doesn't it? Like a typo almost. But it's actually pretty logical once you break it down. Remember those auxiliary verbs we were geeking out about earlier?
Oh, are you about to connect the dots? Because those auxiliary verbs are starting to make a lot more sense now.
That's what I'm here for. The first have is our trusty helper verb, setting us up with that present perfect or past perfect tense. Then the second have, that's our main verb.
So it's like a tag team.
Love it. The first have steps into the ring, sets the stage, and the second one comes in for the knockout.
And suddenly, double haves don't seem so scary anymore.
See? Knowledge is power.
Okay, we've covered a ton. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to the basics. What are the key to have takeaways our listeners absolutely need to remember?
You got it. Number one, to have, it's got layers. It can be a main verb. It can be an auxiliary verb. It even joins forces with other words to make modal verbs.
Like it's got multiple personalities.
And each personality comes with its own set of rules, but don't let that intimidate you.
It's like each version of to have has its own secret handshake or something.
I like that. And the more you practice those handshakes, the smoother your English is going to sound.
So important. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into to have, the British Council, they actually end their article on a super cool note.
They did, didn't they? It's not every day grammar gets down with, wait for it, grime music.
Tell me about an unexpected combo. And not just any grime artist, they bring up Stormzy.
Love Stormzy.
Same. The article even quotes a line from Crown, his song I Have My Reasons and Life Has Its Lessons.
So good, right? And such a perfect example of how those different to have vibes, they bring so much meaning to the table.
It's like this reminder that language is everywhere. You know, it's not just about textbook rules. It's about making it your own.
100%. Owning it, expressing yourself, that's where the magic happens.
Couldn't agree more. So to everyone out there who's on that mission to master English, just remember, even a word as simple as to have, it's got hidden depths. It can unlock so much. And those moments you have along the way, those are what it's all about.
Absolutely. Celebrate those. They're proof you're learning and growing.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah.
This has been such a fun deep dive. I never realized how much we take these little words for granted.
Right. They're the unsung heroes of language. Always something new to discover with them.
Preach. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But don't worry, we'll be back soon with a whole new adventure in English. Until then, happy listening.